Hello, Dibs. Welcome to the Dads and Business Fantasy Football Weekly Recap Show. This is the Week 1 edition, and I am your host, Bennett, here to wrap up the week's play in fantasy football. And of course, as you would expect with Week 1, it was a pretty crazy week. You spent all offseason looking at the draft, looking at the free agents, looking at who's changing what, who's hurt, who's retired, who's changing teams. And you have all these rankings, you do the draft, and then kind of everything gets thrown out the window once the games start. And of course, this week started on Thursday. We also had a Friday game and then a ton of games Sunday and ending with Monday Night Football. So before we get into the recap, just want to talk a little bit about what I did over the weekend in terms of football. This is kind of a dad moment for you. So Sunday we had, first day of religious school. My daughter had a softball game Saturday. She had a game on Sunday. My son had a baseball game on Sunday. So my wife and I decided to divide and conquer. And I took my daughter to her softball game. And then we promptly went home and I introduced my daughter, Jillian, into her first ever week of Red Zone football, the Red Zone channel. So we sat down, we got the computer set up in the living room. I've got my fantasy football team on one quadrant of the laptop. We've got my daughter's team, which is in a different league. We've got my team from that league. And then we've got something else. Oh, the baseball scores we were watching in the upper right corner. So we sit down. It's 2:00. We got the Red Zone on one channel. We got the Atlanta Braves on another channel, and we're in it. And this is the first time my daughter ever got a chance to sit down and really pay attention. And I'm going a mile a minute trying to explain all the nuances. The games are going back and forth. Meanwhile, my Braves are in an excruciating game against the Blue Jays. They cannot score a run. They need the game more than anything. So we spent 3 hours doing all that, watching the fantasy, looking at the updates, explaining everything. And it was heaven. And, my daughter seemed to like it, although she said at the end she had no clue what was going on in spite of my best efforts. So that was my football weekend. I don't always get to sit on the couch and watch football on Sundays. As a matter of fact, I prefer to, be doing something with the family or outside. But every once in a while, the stars align and I get to just sit on my butt and watch football. And it was really nice to have two big screens in my living room and my daughter next to me, and we had a blast. Now, I wish I could say the same thing for the Killer Bees fantasy football team, because as we go into the weekly recap, the number one seeded Killer Bees, number one in the power rankings after the draft, promptly got crushed in the fantasy football game. As you can see here, the Derry Demons, who were the highest scoring team in the league by 1 point over Sausage Party, they dominated. Now we'll go back a little bit because as you can look, if you look at my scoring here, I started off with the first game of the season with 26 points from Lamar Jackson. And then subsequently, not a single double-digit point total from anyone else the rest of the weekend. And that, of course, culminated with the icing on the cake, Christian McCaffrey being ruled out about an hour or two before game time. So, of course, by Monday night, there's no one else you can put in unless there's a free agent or you happen to have the running back on the other team. So I quickly scrambled and got Kurt Jusick in. He got 5 points, but by that point, it was completely irrelevant because, again, no one else got double digits. And it was just a brutal game for me. Meanwhile, Derry Demons got to be really happy. Of course, Friday night, they had Saquon Barkley, tons of points on Friday, 32. Josh Allen started off slow, but ended up having an amazing game, as he is wont to do. And then just a little bit of everything. I mean, Travis Etienne, if he doesn't fumble the ball into the end zone, he gets another 6 or 7 points. Chris Godwin had a good game on Sunday. So just all around, a lot of points. Even though, as you can see, they had Jaden Reed on the bench with 33 points, but that didn't matter. The Derry Demons win the game 132-5 to 71-5. Next up, we have the Mahomies, and they win their first game over Jeff Bliss's Only Idiots Play for College. Questionable start of Brock Purdy, questionable draft slot as well. He only got 10 points last night in the Monday night game, but as you can see, just a cumulative point total from everyone else. Obviously, you're not going to get 21 points from your kicker every week, but the Dallas defense had a touchdown, and Nico Collins had a good game for the Texans, and James Conner looked really good for Houston. I think he's going to have a good year. Same with Kamara in a blowout. So nothing spectacular, but the Mahomes get double digits from like most of their team. They get 123 points. And of course, even with Brock Purdy, they've got Tua on the bench, so they may think about putting Tua in next week. Meanwhile, Only Idiots got 7 points from Joe Burrow. Nice game Thursday night from Pacheco, and Flowers looked like he was going to have a big game, only with 7 points. And then, of course, you've got the Tyreek Hill incident with that before the game, but an amazing kind of 80-plus yard play or whatever that was that only Tyreek can make. So he gets 25.5 points, but not enough cumulatively to overtake the Mahomes. So good game from Only Idiots, but they lose to the Mahomes. We've got the not ChatGPT also scoring a lot of points over the Cash Flow Crusaders. Friday night, again, Jalen Hurts, not a spectacular game, especially with Barkley getting all the touchdowns, but 19 points is pretty good. Breece Hall, he got 14 points last night. Montgomery had a really good game. Every time I looked up on the Sunday night game, Montgomery's charging ahead, and he got the game-winning touchdown in overtime. So that's always nice when a real-life play impacts fantasy. Deebo Samuel did pretty good last night. So just an all-around good game. Solid team from ChatGPT. They're probably going to be there. The Crusaders, not too shabby with 110 points. They would have beaten most of the teams in the league. They got 12 from Prescott, Rashad White 13, Achane with 18.5, Mike Evans, the ageless guy, 20.5, and then 19 from Worthy. That was in the first game, as I mentioned in my preview show. So not a bad score by the Crusaders, but they lose by about 18 points. And then we have the End Zone versus the Weird Emoji Name Team. And the Weird Emoji Name Team wins 109-5-71. They get a bittersweet 19 points from Jordan Love, who got hurt on the last drive of the game. The silver lining for them is that they have a good backup in Matt Stafford, in addition to having Cooper Kupp, who had an amazing game. So you've got Cooper Kupp, who's back. You've got an injured Puka Nacua. So even though Jordan Love's out, they can probably weather the storm. They did get 24 points from Joe Mixon as well. Not too much else going on there, but they got 3 big scorers on the day, and that's enough to get 109 points. Unfortunately, the Esquires only had 2 players in double digits, and the kicker got the second highest points on the team. So very disappointing game by Caleb Williams, if not pretty not surprising. Very disappointing with Amon-Ra St. Brown only getting 2.5 points, and Marvin Harrison Jr. You'd think they would at least target him on one 15-yard play and he'd get at least 3 catches, but he had 1 catch for 4 yards. So disappointing rookies, Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison, and the Esquires lose to Team Machado. We've got Sausage Party, who almost had the league high in points with 131.5. They had CJ Stroud was as good as expected. Ramondre Stevenson, I was a little surprised that he was good, but considering they went into Cincinnati, but they manhandled Cincinnati with a veteran quarterback. Jamison Williams had 24 points in the evening game, and just an all-around pretty solid game when you've got 20, 20, 15, and 24. And CeeDee Lamb only with 10 points. He's obviously only going to get better. So that's a really nice showing by Sausage Party. They're looking good. You've got Matt's monstrous team, not terrible. They do almost get 100 points. Obviously, that first game, they had Henry and Mahomes were okay. And then just, not terrible. Obviously, Jalen Waddle was overshadowed a little bit by Tyreek Hill. Justin Jefferson only had 13 points. So again, not terrible from Matt's monstrous team. They're probably going to be okay. And obviously, you got Mahomes, and then look at Baker Mayfield on the bench with 33 points. So good job for Sausage Party winning the game. And then finally, we have Go Bijan Go beating Judgment Day 112-83. I'm actually pretty surprised. So good pick with Anthony Richardson with 29 points. I was not high on him. Bijan only had 12 points. Obviously, the Falcons, super disappointing offense, but they did play the Steelers. As a Falcons fan myself, I'm not too worried. I think the Falcons will be fine, but Bijan only gets 12 and a half. 11 from Jacobs. But the big one was the 29 from Anthony Richardson, 18 from Stephon Diggs, who looks great. Going to catch tons of balls there in Houston, and just a nice showing all around from everybody else to get to 112. And Judgment Day, not so much. They have the one of the lowest scorers of the league of the week. Kyler Murray was okay. If he could have had a last drive, it would have gotten some more points if he could have converted on the last drive. And just not quite enough all around, although A.J. Brown did have a nice game. And then I always like to look on the bench to see if there's anyone on the bench with lots of points. In this case, Jaden Daniels had a lot of points. He was probably the best rookie quarterback of the day. So there you go with the week. Let's look at the power rankings. And as I mentioned in the preview show, that the power rankings are pretty much kind of arbitrary, because I was number one in the power rankings going into week one. And after one crappy week, I'm down to 12. And Sausage Party, who was the 12th ranked team, is up to 2. So take it for what you will. But look at all that movement on the first day. So I just think the power ranking AI is not that great, even though I'm still confident in my team. But I don't think I should go all the way down to 12 after one crappy week. So there you go. We'll take a quick look at the standings. Obviously, not much here. Each division, half the teams won, half the teams lost. And before we go, I have a segment I like to call the Bench Player of the Week Award. So this stems from everybody who's played fantasy knows that there are often times where you're debating on who to start at a certain position. And I know, at least for me, Murphy's Law, I always pick the wrong one. And the guy that you benched turns out to blow up. So this week's Bench Player of the Week did not affect the outcome of the game. That was the Derry Demons with Jaden Reed, who had 33 fantasy points, 4 catches, 138 yards, and a touchdown. Doesn't get any better than that. He's on the bench. So again, in this case, he had the number one points for wide receiver this week. In this case, it did not affect the Derry Demons, but we are going to award Jaden Reed the week 1 fantasy football bench player of the week. Congratulations to Jaden, and sigh of relief from Ben over with the Derry Demons. So that's going to do it for the week 1 recap. And don't forget to check your injury reports. Don't forget to get your starters in, and good luck coming up this week. There's actually a pretty good game on Thursday, the Dolphins and the Bills. So enjoy the week, gentlemen, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.